All right, so to start things off, we're going to be taking a look at a Sapphire Ruby mirror match. We're going second, so we're on the draw. And with a mirror match, you probably just want to be able to develop your curve nicely. I mean, ideally you want to do that in every match, but it is super important in the mirror match because if they end up developing the Hiram and the Fishbone Quill before you basically just lose the game. And being on the draw, obviously it means that they're going to be able to establish that stuff first if they do have those cards in hand. So my opponent starts off by inking a Maui, playing a Popsicle. So one of the best starts you can get for this deck in playing Popsicle on turn one. We're not that bad being able to ink a Tamatoa that we drew for turn there and playing the Develop Your Brain. I opt to take a Maui there. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you take. It's just ink. And that's one of those situations where, would you ink to Develop Your Brain or play it? I think it's more valuable to play it here because what we ideally wanted to see on turn two was a one jump ahead, but it's fine. We're able to put down this ice block, which is just fodder for the Hiram to draw cards with. But again, the opponent being on the play does represent them being able to establish their Hirams first. Now you do see Bells being played by my opponent here, and this is a popular option in this deck where it was really only teched into Sapphire Steel last set. It was starting to see its way into the Ruby Sapphire decks later on, but for me it mostly just represents ink. For the Lucky Dime, I'm mostly looking to close it out with a Tamatoa. I don't think I necessarily want to go the Bell route all the time. But Bell can help you aggressively ink as well. But this is the issue you're going to run into, like I talked about in the deck profile, is that you need to see the Hirams in order to really ramp up your hand, right? And if your Hiram gets outed after it's played or it's quested once, you may not just have enough cards in hand to really utilize the Bell, whereas the Sapphire Steel player has a whole new world if they're still playing that in order to refill their hand and keep inking with the Bell. Regardless though, you see here that I'm forced to ink my Hiram because it was my only inkable so that I could use Fishbone Quill to ink one of my uninkable cards. And at this point, I opted to value Madame Medusa-ing my opponent's Hiram rather than developing my own Hiram. And the reason is, again, because I'm on the draw. My opponent being on the play, if I played my Hiram and let their Hiram live, they would be able to quest with their Hiram and get an additional 2, and then they probably have an out because they have all their ink available for my Hiram that I opt to play. So that was a critical moment in the game, I think, where I just had to make the decision to say, I'm going to put us into kind of a top deck mode where it's just like we're not functioning off Hiram. So we both lost one Hiram so far, and we're now in a race to see who can get the next Hiram. And these scry cards are going to help. My opponent is obviously ahead in the ink count. They're on 10 ink, I'm on 7. But this is a matchup, again, where your high-value targets, you're likely only playing one interaction right now per turn anyways. So you see I go wide here, and I am definitely at risk for running into a Be Prepared, but knowing that like most other opposing Ruby Sapphire lists have cut Be Prepared in favor of the Sisus, this is where the Sisu is basically, I don't want to say useless, but like you drop a Sisu here, it's just a 3-quester, right? And then it likely just gets outed before it does anything. I'm going to Maleficent Dragon it, Be Prepared it, or Ice Block it down, and then Medusa it. As you can see, my opponent ends up Medusing my Medusa after Ice Blocking it there. This is where How Far I'll Go has a really good utility, is when you're able to sing it with like a Medusa that's already got its ability off, because now that just feels really great. And that single point of advantage there is probably what propelled me ahead in this game and enabled me to retake tempo away from my opponent. You can see here I have a better board, I have more cards in hand, and they're kind of a little bit behind it now. Now this Maleficent is going to pop off even harder, taking out that Tamatoa next turn, and I have the Inkable in the Maui. The opponent, though, is just top decking like crazy from the Popsicle into the Scuttle, and I'm just like, please don't draw into a hero at this point. They crash the Medusa, and now it looks like I'm in a bad spot. But again, I know I have this Maleficent that's going to be able to take out this Tamatoa and this Scuttle that they have in the hand. I forget what item they took to their hand there, but it's not too threatening. We're going to continue to quest here and just see what the opponent is going to be able to do. Again, as long as they don't draw the Hiram, this is the state of the game. This is what I talked about in the deck profile. They load up on their items, hoping to draw into a Tamatoa, and again, they're just in top deck mode. Yes, they can top deck Gramatalas and develop your brains and things like that to scry deeper, but again, that takes time, and that's going to cost them ink. It's going to slow them down in terms of tempo in order to develop those threats, and this is the state of the game now. I've also cut my ice blocks down to 2, but yeah, look at this. Like, what is the opponent going to do here? I have a Be Prepared and a Brawl in my back pocket anyways to like clean up the board. They do eventually see the hero. They still have 7 ink, but at this point it's too late. Even if they were playing Be Prepared and wipe the board, like they're going to wipe out all of their threats too, and it costs them their whole turn to play it. So they were just too far behind it. The critical points in this game for me were opting to ink my Hiram and play my Medusa to out my opponent's Hiram. If my opponent had the second Hiram, I just lose the game. But they didn't. We were in a top deck mode. I established my board, whereas they didn't, and we both weren't on Hirams, and I was just able to get ahead. And then the second turning point was me getting my How Far I'll Go being sung by the Medusa, because that just ramped me up and got me, you know, a scry 2. My Medusa essentially goes like 2 for 1 in a like non-standard sense, where it got the value off of being played, and then it was able to sing a song for me, which was huge. And now at this point, yeah, I pretty much have the game won. Not sure what I'm doing here. Okay, I'm just probably going to pass. Yeah, again, knowing that the opponent, even though they have a ton of ink here, can't really utilize it all that well. So it was a GG. But yeah, oh, they eventually do get the Sisu, so that's nice. And then they can crash both of their characters into the Maleficent, but like I said, I have a Be Prepared to out that Sisu anyways. I have a Tamatoa that they just can't deal with unless they top deck their way into another like hard removal option, like basically only Maleficent Dragon, I think. Yeah, I mean, you know, props to them for not giving up, but let's see here. We draw 1-drop Sisu. I'm just going to drop this Tamatoa, get a Popsicle back. Oh, I don't even have one. Okay, just pass on questing for 6. The opponent, you know, top deck what they need. It's going to be a GG. Let's move on to the next match. Alright, so next up we're going up against a Ruby Amber deck, and I'm a huge fan of this ink combination after Ursula's return. There are so many different ways I think you can experiment with this color combination, playing Mufasas, not playing Mufasas. I think that it's going to be a decent meta contender. It's I don't want to say this yet because it's too early still, but it almost feels like Ruby Amber is replacing Ruby Amethyst. Like it's what Ruby Amethyst wants to be after Ursula's return, but you know, Ruby Amethyst just fell behind at this point. Anyways, we're on the play here, so again, huge advantage for us being on the play. And what we're going to be able to do here is, again, develop the Popsicle and Scuttle. Unfortunately, the Scuttle misses, but that's fine. It's just 4 cards out of the way for me to eventually find that Fishbone Quill. That's the way you got to look at it, right? But the opponent opts to develop the Mulan here, and we just know that they're planning to shift the Mulan. What's funny is in this matchup, this Flynn Rider actually is a problem because all of my low to the ground stuff for the next couple of turns just can't get a high strength character on board. Like I need to try to turbo out a Maui or a Medusa, or just remove the Flynn Rider with stuff like Brawl, which you saw me do there, because this card can get them like 6 to 9 lore, even more maybe, before I'm able to develop some of my big hitters, because I don't have the Fishbone Quill to ramp my way into it. So you can see me again, I have these 1 strength characters on board, they're not really doing anything, and I know my opponent is still 1 away from the shift Mulan, so I'm like, okay, I'm fine to quest here. They drop a Gaston, and I'm like, okay, this is a bit of a problem. In this scenario, oh yeah, I updated this deck list, by the way. Like I mentioned, I cut back the uninkables, I put in some goofies. I can maybe break this down a little bit later, but here you're going to see the Ice Block come in super clutch, reducing that Gaston that they played, so I'm going to prevent them from dropping a Medusa or a big threat on the next turn. And I believe they missed an ink, so they must be sitting on a couple of uninkables. Without a doubt, they're sitting on a Medusa here. But I'm able to just use some of these cards to scry a little bit before I drop the Sisu, in combination with that Ice Block that I played prior to getting benched with the Hiram to draw 2, in order to drop the Sisu and out the Gaston there. Again, this Flynn Rider doing work for the opponent, gaining them that lore while they wait. So the fact that they're stuck on this lower ink count means that they're not threatening the Mulan yet. Once that Gaston is able to exert, they will likely play the Mulan. So I'm guessing they either have Medusa and or Mulan in hand, and they don't want to ink the Mulan because they want to shift it. So because I have these Be Prepareds, which I can maybe talk about why I think Be Prepared should be played in this deck, because I know it's been cut or reduced, but I really do think Be Prepared has a ton of utility still, and I would opt to probably re-include them in the deck. I'm fine to quest here, because I need to keep questing with the Serum to draw the cards, which you see me doing here. And I've talked about this in the deck profile video, where I said, you know, if you're able to quest with the Hiram after you play it and you get like 2, well, I guess like 4 or 6 cards off of the Hiram, you likely just win the game. So here, yeah, my opponent ends up doing the Shift Mulan combo and basically wiping out my board here, because they're going to be able to challenge the Hiram as well if they want to take it out. But it costs them all the cards in their hand. They may have a Rapunzel that they also opt not to ink here. They want to keep it to draw their cards. But look at my hand, and I have the Be Prepared, which I knew I was going to be able to play this turn. So I was fine, like I said, questing with the Hiram, drawing the cards, like overextending my board, knowing that the Mulan shift was likely coming, or a Medusa or whatever. and just having my opponent play into the be prepared, because most people think that Sapphire Ruby just has not been playing be prepared now, or cut them down to 1 or whatever. But for me, I'm back up to 3 personally. And you can see it coming in super clutch here. So we're going to drop the Scuttle. You could argue I should take the Lucky Dime there, but I'm not relying on Lucky Dimes as much as you may think you need to from what the deck did in Ursula's Return, because at this point I'm valuing the control aspect more than trying to race my opponent, because we're not necessarily in a race, because again, yeah, go ahead and overextend. This is their 3rd Flynn Rider now at this point. I could play the Medusa to out it, but I don't want to risk them dropping the Rapunzel, because again, they're only on 4 ink, right? So clearly they have cards in hand that are highly valuable that they want to keep, like the Rapunzel and the Mulan there, or they have uninkable. So yeah, they drop a Julieta without being able to heal anything, and so at this point I can just drop another Scuttle and then drop the Madame Medusa, and at this point there's almost nothing the opponent can do to come back. I have established board control, and in this particular scenario, controlling the board state and the state of the game was more important than the race, and that's why you saw me play it out the way I did. The opponent is going to end up resigning, and that's going to be a GG. Let's go ahead and take a look at one more matchup before we wrap up this video. The final match I want to take a look at is against an Amber Steel player here, and traditionally this has been a very dominant matchup for you, simply because again Ruby seems to really dominate against Steel, but also the fact that Amber Steel essentially have to play a whole new world. And I mean, I guess you could say they don't have to, because if they play Beast Tragic Hero and Rapunzels, they have card draw through that, but it's usually not enough because they dump their hand out pretty quickly with a lot of smaller characters and or songs in order to out your threats, so they just need that replenishment, and you benefit hugely off of that. Being on the draw here doesn't really impact too much, like you still have a very favorable matchup. But this opponent isn't on the traditional build, they're on a much more aggro focused build. Here you can see Pride Lands, they've inked I think the Prince and Piglet already, so if they were playing out those threats, questing for 2 each time, or 3 on the Piglet there, I would be in a really bad spot actually. So we have to hopefully slow them down long enough so that we can get to our top end obviously, and once we do, the match should be fairly comfortable. But we do have to be wary of bare necessities and things like that, because those could rip away our Fishbone Quill, so that's why you're seeing me keep both of them in my hand in case that is something that comes down. The opponent might be thinking, okay, their turn 3, they might opt to play the bare necessities, or sorry, the Fishbone Quill, so I'll save my bare necessities to play it on my turn 3, which is going to be, at the end of their turn 2. Thankfully though, we are able to establish the Fishbone Quill, but now we have to worry about potential item removal. But in this kind of aggro focused deck, they're probably less geared towards control and more geared towards aggro, so we probably don't have to worry too much about them outing our items here, because that new I don't know if it's a song or if it's just an action, but the I Flatten Them, basically what I call Heavy Storm, it destroys all items, would be like insanely strong against me right here, right? It would literally just wipe out my first 3 turns worth of stuff. I'm gonna opt to brawl away the Prince, because again I just want to slow the opponent down a little bit. I can live with the Pride Lands giving them 1 lore a turn, and then them getting 1, well potentially an additional 2 if they shift the Stitch here. But if they Whole New World, it wouldn't be the worst. I was hopefully trying to play for the Sisu as well, but again it's just a little slow, and obviously they're getting quite high up on the lore, but their hand is very small here, so I opt to drop the Hiram, ink my other Hiram there, and keep the Scar, because it might be pretty useful to run into the Stitch and the Pride Lance there. They're going to end up dropping off the Simba, and that's fine, because I know that they're probably going to also opt to move the Simba, which is going to take up 2 of their ink for turn, which is going to really limit their extension plays. Now they are drawing off the Stitch off these small characters, and if you know anything from set 3, the Stitch Pride Lands combo is something that they can go extremely wide on the board with. However, this is where Sisu really cleans up. You see me hovering it over there. Yeah, the Sisu will just wipe out all of their smaller drops, and with this Ice Block I'm going to be able to reduce the strength of this Stitch, so the boost that it gets from the Pride Lands is essentially not important at all. So yeah, they have 3 cards in hand. We're going to quest with the Hiram. They can't deal with my Hiram right now, and it just means that I'm just going to absolutely just dominate. Once the Sisu comes down, it wipes out both of their threats. They have a Pride lands that I'm going to be able to clean up next turn between the Sisu and the Scar that I keep in my hand here. And I think the opponent is just going to end up resigning soon once they realize I developed too many top end threats. Despite them getting quite high up there on the lore, and this fill potentially could be something they can close the game out with if they're able to play fill and multiple heroes for multiple turns, but they just don't have enough cards in order to do that. And I'm going to be able to out the fill and stuff probably without any major issues here. Yeah, I do have to draw the removal though, unfortunately, for their top end stuff. Thankfully, we do draw into another ice block and a Sisu, which is going to be able to take out the fill. And unless they can drop 2 characters next turn and quest for 3 with the Piglet, they're not going to be able to close the game out because the Sisu and the Maui there is going to be able to take out the Pride lands. And I mean, we're not out of the woods yet, because if they had 2 characters, you know, they quest for 3 with Piglet, and then they can quest for game next turn if I don't have removal for their 2 characters. So you can see, like, even in this matchup, like, it's not necessarily an auto win. Thankfully, we drew the Medusa here, and we still have the Hiram to draw cards. But this is kind of the state of Ruby Sapphire. You just have to keep hoping to draw the removal. But again, because the aggro deck couldn't keep up with the card draw, we're able to close this one out. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section below if you've made it this far, and make sure you check out the deck profile where I kind of cover the strengths and weaknesses of this deck a little bit more in detail. And let me know if you do want to see an updated version of this, because I think we will see a lot of iterations of this deck throughout the meta. But yeah, on screen here is likely the deck list in Dreamborn Inc. picturesque form. So again, you can see the deck list in the link in the description as well on dreamborn.inc. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you again if you've made it this far. Quantum is out.